Hey everybody, welcome back to the Sharon Show. I'm so excited for today's episode. This has been one that's kind of been a long time in the making, and a lot of stuff that we've talked about up until this point is going to feed right into this episode, but we will give you a brief recap. So if you miss any of our episodes, first of all, how dare you? But no, it's okay. But I do suggest going back and watching some of our episodes to get a little bit more context. But like I said, we're going to recap it. But before we do that stuff, I'm going to introduce my great friend Sharon, co-host of this show. Hi, Sharon. How are you doing today?
I'm good. Thank you.
That's awesome.
I know that's not my usual, but I'm just being silly.
Yeah, well, it's a good episode to be silly because we're going to be talking about some very heavy stuff today. I mean, not as heavy as the death episode, that one, if you guys haven't seen episode 13, go watch that after this. After you watch this, go watch episode 13. Put it on your queue. It's a good one for sure. But today we're going to be talking about, like I said, everything that lines up with what we've really been talking about, what we see, issues we see out with society and all these different things. But before we do that, I have a quote. And I'm going to read that quote.
And I will shuffle cards.
And this quote is from the Tao because we love the Tao so much. And
I love the Tao.
Tao Te Ching, verse 60, governing a large country is like frying a small fish. You spoil it with too much poking. Center your country in the Tao and evil will have no power. Not that it isn't there, but you'll be able to step out of its way. Give evil nothing to oppose, and it will disappear by itself.
Wow.
Yeah. Some words of wisdom there.
Indeed. Well, it's time to pull a card. So here I go. Well. 10 of Pentacles.
10 of Pentacles.
It's a good card.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm covering half of my eyes, so people are going to be like, oh my God.
Illuminati confirmed.
Illuminati confirmed.
I like this card because, like I said, this episode is going to be a culmination of a lot of things we've been talking about over the past few weeks. So this card, the 10 of Pentacles, is like a culmination of a lifetime of working and establishing things for your family and kind of passing it down to them. That's really what this card's about, I guess.
Yes. It's about abundance.
Yeah.
And passing it down. Well. Mm-hmm. That's right.
And passing it down in a responsible way where you're teaching people how to fish, not giving them a fish. But, I don't want to spoil anything.
We'll talk about that later.
I know. We're going to be talking about fish a lot for some reason.
Yeah, when you said fish in this quote, I was like, wait, where'd that come from?
Yeah.
That's a sink.
That's another reason why I love that. I wanted to use that quote because we're going to be talking about government and fishing and sustainability and all that stuff. And a quick recap before we get beginning on a recap of the recap before the recap. If you're new to the show and you're watching this, we just want to explain our views on the tarot really quickly. We don't view it as a magical device, a do all, be all, end all. It's just a collection. To me, it's like a collection of symbolism because that's how I got into it. I was studying ancient symbolism and really like from a historical point of view, because I was looking into all these ways that people could get stuck into like a system of controls, like a conspiratorial angle. I woke up to all this stuff that was going on, like Cecil Rhodes and all, we talked about him last episode or maybe 2 episodes ago. Yeah, 2 episodes ago. And I was just kind of blown away by all this stuff. And the more I looked, the more it was pointing towards symbolism. So when I got into symbolism, everything was pointing toward the tarot. And the tarot is just like a catalog really of different symbols. And it's kind of like that saying, if you're not careful, you don't know your history, you're bound to repeat it. Kind of one of those things. So this is a way to get a look at what's going on around us without getting lost in the shuffle of if you try to get an idea of what's going on by looking at the news or the internet or truth or stuff, you're just going to go crazy. So this is more of like an archetype, and that's how we view it. We don't think that the cards have any magical powers. The only power I really ascribe to it is the power of synchronicity. It's just like what card that the universe or God or the all or whoever wants us to look at and to focus on at that particular time and point in time. So that's really just all I want to say about that.
Yeah. And it contains cycles, just like the cycles of our lives. So,
Yeah.
when you're starting something, when you're ending something, when you're right in the middle of something. So that's another reason that we've been using it, because, we're always going through cycles of learning in
Yeah,
our
great point.
lives.
Because it's like cycles within cycles. Have like a really large cycle, like the founding of this country, like 200 years allegedly, and then there's like the life cycles in each person, which lasts like I don't know, 60, 100, 200, 120 years or however long people live. And then and within that, you have smaller cycles within your life. You have like your childhood and your adult, your teenage years and your adult years and later years and stuff like that. So there's just different cycles and cycles. And it's like a map, really. That's kind of how I look at the tarot. It's like a roadmap to decipher some of that stuff in like a compass to try to get an idea where you are. And
Yeah.
so we wanted to recap a little bit what we're talking about to give this episode some context. And we're going to talk about things we talk about in past episodes about religion, organized religion, really, governments, and how they're basically just slave systems and how it's a system of control. It is a way for somebody to take their personal responsibility and give it to somebody else. And then they could just go about their daily life and engage in escapism and again, these are going to sound like judgments because most people are like, well, I got to go to work every day. I gotta support my kids. And I understand all that. We're just highlighting how this system is set up. And Sharon and I are two people throughout our life experiences. We just ended up without any children and we're both single and we both have a lot of free time on our hands to look into these things. So we kind of take it as our
Yeah.
responsibility to look into things like this because people that are watching the show might not have that time. So we could just take it all, condense it all down and give you like the Reader's
Distill it.
Digest version, of what we have found. And then I always encourage people to look into this stuff for yourself if you want. All the stuff we talk about, we're not making claims here. We're just reporting what we've come across. And it seems to me religion, if you go back to the Council of Nicaea, Council of Trent, all these things, the way that one of our favorite Roman emperors, what was his name?
Constantine?
Constantine, yeah, how he was able to take a bunch of pagans, quote unquote pagans, and a bunch of quote unquote Christians that he had, and he was able to form this nice, neat religion that everybody could adhere to, and it worked for everybody. And then he had it as this nice system of control. And then it really morphed into government, honestly. I mean, even back then it was government, but today we look at government and religion as two different things. But back then, it really was one thing. You had a pharaoh or an emperor who was like a god king. Even in little newer, like Napoleon was technically a god king, or Charlemagne, or all these people that we hear about. They had the blessing from the crown. They had the crown for the government, and then they also had the blessing from the church, from the Pope or whoever it was. So they were like this embodiment of a figure on the planet, on a figurehead. And we've already talked about this before, but it basically boils down to these things are just slave systems. They're systems of control, and people are in them because in their mind, they're a slave. And we talk about how it's not really direct slavery, like how they try to tell us how antebellum slavery was back during the Civil War, where it was like whips and chains. This is more of an internal slave. You're actually really just a slave to your own mind. And because you're in this state, people that know that are at the tops of these systems of control are able to take advantage of that. And let me just click on that so I can see it better. There we go.
It could be because you've allowed yourself to get into these states because you haven't healed any traumas from your past and all these things that could have been passed down to you, whether through epigenetics, whether through ancestry, your family history, even if you believe in past lives, anything in your past life, any karma that hasn't been transmuted, etc. And so
Yeah.
that's why you can get yourself into these states of potentially being enslaved in your
Yeah. And
mind.
one of the big ones really is sexual abuse. A lot of people are sexually abused when they're children. And then because of it, it just has this effect, and this is stuff we've talked about before, but it has this effect on you, all this trauma that we end up encountering in our lives, and it puts us in the state where we want to get all our validation from external sources. And it's the same thing with schools do this to you, when you're growing up in like your any kind of religions and stuff. It's the same thing. You're always going to either the teacher, or in the religion you're going to like the priest or the pastor. You're always going to somebody above you for that validation, instead of looking inside and trusting your intuition for that validation. And
Yeah.
we talked about that. Let me just scroll on my notes here.
Yeah, but the reason we bring this up is that we want to talk about how we get into these places where uh, we're enlightened, and we kind of feel like we're awake and we realize things, and then all of a sudden we may want to share it with the whole world. So in those cases, what ends up happening, and what do we end up doing about it?
Yeah, exactly. So everything, that nice little recap brings us to exactly that point. And that happened to me, when I woke up to a lot of the stuff and I saw what was going on. And I'm sure everybody watching the show, if you're actually watching the show and somebody didn't force you to watch it and you're still watching, then you know what we're talking about. You see the conspiracies that are going on, the secret societies, the Illuminati, all these people who look like they're quote unquote controlling the world, and they're controlling the people at the tops of the systems that we were talking about, like religions and governments. And you want to just tell everybody about it. You're like, oh my God, you have to see this video. You got to check this out. Look what they're doing. Look what the fluoride does to the water. That was one big one that I was onto. Like, and even in the mid 2000s, I used to try to tell everybody about the fluoride in the water. And after a while, what happened was I just realized that some people, I mean, it didn't even take that long. It was probably the first person I tried telling. They just don't care. And I feel like it's really built into that slave system, into that internal mind slavery when you're a slave in your own mind, because it's so big that you really can't do anything about it as a person. You feel really powerless. So I think that feeling of powerlessness just kind of shuts people off, and they just are like, whatever. And they just glaze over, and you get the cognitive dissonance kicking in. No matter how much proof that you show them, it just really doesn't matter. And there's a lot of belief systems that are out there that talk about this kind of stuff, because I feel like it's been going on for a really long time. So there's a lot of different groups. You have like truthers, different sovereignty groups, political parties like libertarians, or the more extreme of that would be ANCAP. That's kind of what I was, an anarcho-capitalist, which means I believe that government is slavery. It's right in the word. The word government, goober from Italian, means to control. Goober, governor, like a gubernatorial race.
Gubernatorial.
Yeah, it means to control. And
Jinx.
Jinx, curse. And then the word mente, it always means mind, just like treatment. That's another one for you. Treatment, they're treating the mind. So they could be, this is the thing, all these groups, they have a lot of truth to them. What they're saying, like the ANCAPs, how they're saying government is slavery, they're really true. And they're like, we should, but the conclusions they come to, I think, might not be the best. They're like, we'll just end government. That's one of the things that they say. And I feel that the tools or the truths that we see in these groups they're still truth. They're still good, but I really feel it's more on an individual level. There's something actually Mark Passio talks about. He says that you should have internal monarchy and external slavery. And what he means is, like, internally, you want to have a monarchy. So you have your thoughts and emotions in alignment to create action. You're using your will to line these things up and to be a person in the world. That's how you want to do it. But then externally, amongst everybody, there shouldn't be one person who's at the top. There shouldn't be one ruler. That's actually what anarchy means. It comes from archon. We've talked about this in past episodes. Archon is somebody who gets in the middle. It's like a middleman between you and the power, you and the sovereignty. And anarchy is just a society without that. But I feel like if you try to just implement that, when you have people that aren't ready for it yet, they're still slaves in their mind. They're just going to look for another hero, for another external savior, for somebody else to kind of order it and do it for them, because they're not ready to take the responsibility for themselves. So all these systems, and even when you get into like hermetics and occulted knowledge and all this stuff, there's a lot of people who say, oh, this is great, you're learning all this stuff, there's all this information in here, all these secrets, all this truth. And again, there's nothing wrong with it. If it's truth, it's true. But I feel that it just, the way that it tries to get applied to societies, that's why I feel like it was always occulted, hidden, because it was really, when you look at the word occulted, it means hidden. And who's it hidden for? Who's it hidden from? But it's
The
really,
masses.
why is it hidden? And who's hiding it? And I think really it's just hidden by somebody's own fear, because they don't want to look into it. So when you bring some kind of information like me with the fluoride in the water, if you're bringing it to somebody, I'm trying to share it with them, but they're occulting it from themselves. They don't want to look into it. It's too big. So you're trying to tell me all the water that comes out of my pipes is dangerous for me? What am I going to do? There's nothing I could do about it. They don't realize you could just get a water system or maybe some kind of way to filter your water. It's just, little steps at a time. Just even really being aware of it at the end of the day, I think helps, as long as you're working towards solutions. And a lot of these groups, especially truthers, you look at like Alex Jones and stuff, they'll just sit there all day and tell you about how the frogs are going to turn gay and how the chai coms are coming and all these like different crazy things that they say, but they never give you solutions. Right. And that really plays back to, it's an individual thing. It's really just a one-on-one kind of way to figure it out. There's no exact instruction manual. It's like that saying that I always repeat, there's one mountaintop and many paths to that top of the mountain. Now, I feel like you could still get together in groups with people and talk about these ideas and try to figure out your own way to do it. But I just think the real problem comes in when you try to collectivize it all and you try to get like a big army to go defeat the other army. But then once you defeat that army, you still have an army. It's like there's still this giant standing army that's going to be around. So the key to this, I really feel, to say it again, because I think it's worth saying, is that it's an individual process. It's not a collective thing. People really should figure this out, or they have to figure it out on their own, or not. You could just keep engaging in escapism. We don't care. This is a judgment-free zone here at the Over Sharon podcast, but I think the real problem is, and it goes back to the Tao, where that quote from the Tao we talked about, where it's like, do you want to change the world? I don't think it can be done. The world is sacred. If you tamper with it, you'll ruin it. So I think that's the problem. A lot of these groups that get together, they try to have this idea like they're going to fix the world and they're going to save everything and they're going to save the whole world. Where again, I don't think it can be saved.
Yeah, and you were talking about who was occulting it and who are you occulting it from. It just also made me think of it in the reverse. So I can be occulting it from someone whom I know is not going to openly accept it, who's going to just shut it off. So just like it says in the Tao, those who know don't speak, those who speak don't know. But also Jesus said, don't cast your pearls to swine. So I could also be occulting it from people I know we're just going to like treat it like crap and just trample all over it.
Yeah. Yeah. I really think that it's because it's all about, again, going back to that belief system. I mean, the internal slavery, like if you're a slave, it's just because you're a slave to your mind. People in that state of mind are always going to look for a savior outside themselves. So if you're sharing this information with them and you're telling them about how the true state of the world, or as true as you can see it, they're going to look, instead of trying to fix themselves, they're going to look for somebody else to come in and save the day. And that's when you get a setup for a dictator or some person who's power hungry, a psychopath, or somebody to come in and take that role, like a politician, like Donald Trump, for example. He was always talking about building a wall and all this stuff that he never did. But it resonated with everybody because they were looking around them and they were seeing things in their mind were deteriorating. So they needed to get it saved. they wanted to build a wall instead of cutting their own grass, instead of raising their own children. We got to keep these Mexicans out. Well, did you go to TGI Fridays or a restaurant the other day where, that's where a bunch of Mexicans are working in the back? And again, I have nothing wrong. Again, when I used to DJ at clubs and bars, I used to love the guys from like South America and Mexico. I would always be friends with them and stuff, but they come here because there's work. Why is there work? Because the kids these days, or or people it's just stuff that they don't want to do, or they could get it done. They'll do it for a lot less. Right. So it just, you could see this way, it takes you out of victim narrative. It's like not something that's happening to you. It's something that you're participating in, you're kind of allowing it to happen in that way.
Right.
Exactly. Go ahead.
My approach, and this is where the fish comes in. My approach over time was to teach someone to fish, because I can give you a little bit of information, but if you don't learn it for yourself, you're just in the same boat. Nothing's going to change. Nothing's going to happen. You're just, you're going to just be like, okay, whatever. But if I show you where to get the information, if I show you how to educate yourself, and you're inspired by that and you're fired up and you want to learn, then you will learn, because, hearing it from someone, yeah, but then you go and dig and you do your own research. That's where you learn, is when you do your own stuff. So I've always been one to want to teach someone, because otherwise then people feel like they have to rely on you. And that I've never liked that feeling, because it is very victimy on their part. And I don't want to feel like I'm their savior. You know what I mean? So I've never liked that feeling.
Yeah. A lot of this information is really dangerous. I feel that's why people had secret societies, because truth can be very dangerous, because if you're not providing solutions for people, you're just going to get them, like you said, in a state of victim narrative. Really, there's going to be a lot of fear associated with all these things that are going on, because they're going to realize that the world that they thought existed isn't the world that, it's not all about Donald Trump and Biden and Barack Obama and Bush. Like, they're not the ones actually coming in to save the day or to get done what you want to get done. It's up to you to do it. But if you just give them these little snippets, and it just, like I said, it's going to create fear, and it puts them back into this state of victim narrative, which really just makes them a slave at the end of the day.
Yeah.
So validate their inner slavery. Go ahead.
Yeah. So in being that slave, they are relying, right? And it just makes me think of the stuff that Owen Benjamin says, like, don't rely on them. Right. So, and the thing with like teaching someone how to fish, it's like, or, not necessarily to fish, but to teach them how to do something. Right. And then they learn themselves. Well, when they learn, they tweak it to their own liking. Right. So when I was learning how to make bread, to make sourdough last year, I knew nothing, absolutely nothing. And then I went to a bear meetup, and this lady bear gave me a start. Well, she gave all the ladies that came a sourdough starter. And I took it home, and I'm like, I have no idea what to do with this thing. So I messaged some of my girlfriends, and one of them sent me a video, and I was like, okay, I'm going to feed the starter. And I was just going to put it in the fridge until I figured out what to do with it. And I realized that that's my go-to. It's like, I don't need to feed discard, because that's another story. But anyway, my method was to feed it and then put it in the fridge and bring it out when I needed it. And so I started to learn how to make bread. And as I learned, every time I made it, I had to tweak stuff, because just because I watched the video that worked for someone doesn't mean it was going to work for me. I have a different oven. I'm at a different elevation. I live in a different location. All these things, all these factors. I was working with a different Dutch oven. I mean, so many factors, right? So I had to tweak it to my to the things that I had. And so if I'm going to hand, it's just like, to me, it just makes me think of, I go back to what Fortune Germain was talking about. Here's the recipe. Just because you can make it with that recipe doesn't mean I can make it with that recipe, right? Because I'm going to have to tweak it to me, to fit, to suit me and my needs. So I had to tweak until I figured out, okay, the settings, the time, the temperature, and everything, when to pull the lid off for it to finish cooking the top or whatever, etc. So yeah, it's just it's a learning experience, and it's tweaked based on your needs.
Yeah, that really reminds me of my career because I'm a DJ and I do a lot of weddings. That's really my specialty these days. And the my friend who taught me, Dwayne, he taught me, we used to go to private parties, and then also I would DJ every weekend at this bar, and he would come in, and in the beginning he was there and he was kind of showing me and telling me what to play, use this song, use that song. And then after a while he's like, this is my style, this is how I do it, but you kind of have to find your own style. You got to take chances. And that's what he said to me. He's like, don't be afraid to take chances. And that really is like fear. There it goes again, right? It's fear. A lot of people, when they're following a recipe or whatever, they're going exactly step by step, exactly, because they're afraid to kind of tweak it or do their own thing because they don't want to fail. So I think that fear of failure is really what's hindering a lot of people. So in my case, I took his advice. And I remember the first time I did it, I was working at there was this giant bar called Playwright, and there was a front bar, and the back was like this big room that was a club. And he would be back there most of the time. But in the beginning of the night, there was another DJ that worked back there. So he would come up with me and hang out. And then when it got busy, he would go toward the end, and he would just kind of like give me songs to play. And then I could like go off on my own way. But I remember the first time I just deviated from the normal list or normal ideas of songs. I played Sublime. I played that song, What I Got, Loving is What I Got. So I'm like, he's never told me to play this. Nobody here has ever asked for it, but I'm just going to play it. And I played it, and the whole place was singing it and going crazy. And he walked up and he's like, holy shit, dude, what's going on? He's like, this is what I'm talking about. And it just gave me that feeling. I was like, wow, this is it. This is what I can do, right? The confidence. And now I was just talking to somebody recently about this. It might have even been you, where sometimes, oh no, it wasn't. It was another DJ. I think sometimes I'll take a chance, like at a wedding or whatever, and I'll be like, oh, let me just do this. And sometimes it doesn't work. Sometimes people look at me, or they're just like, but it's okay. You have to be okay. Like you had to find the line, you have to step over it, right? So then I just switch it up or go somewhere else. But it's that fear that I don't have that enables me to go on and do my own thing. Now I have my own style and way of doing things, where some people that I've seen that have been doing it even longer than me, they're kind of afraid to step out of that comfort zone. They have this different set. They'll play this song after that song. They always do it this way. And when I work with those people, it used to really frustrate me, but now I see what it is. It's just the fear that they're afraid to kind of step out of it. So there's nothing I can really do about it. Why should I get frustrated? It's just what it is. So I accept it. And, but yeah, it's the same thing. Like you were saying with fishing, and when you teach a man how to fish, he's not going to fish exactly how you do, right? And we were talking about this on the phone. They're going to have to find their own way. There's definitely techniques and certain things and lures. Like I used to bass fish a lot when I was younger, and you have all these, when you're bass fishing, it's crazy. You got to take in all the conditions. Like, is it sunny out? Is it cloudy? Is it rainy? Is it windy? Wow. Different lures will work in different types of water. So you have that knowledge, but then you always have to go outside of that. It's because sometimes different things will work. So you always have to take a chance and just really trust your intuition and have no fear,
Yeah, that's amazing. And it also, this topic is reminding me also of like, just because we're talking about, ways to save the world or whatnot. Right. And I'm thinking about Benjamin and the things he says about like, don't rely on the system. So he's telling people, learn to grow your own food, learn to garden, learn to this, learn to that, right? So we're all kind of learning little different aspects of those things. So we don't have to rely on them, right? And, if you are going to a grocery store to get certain things, and I'm not judging anybody because I still go, but if you're doing that, you're still relying on something, right? And if you um, learn to grow your own vegetables and whatnot, um, you're you're gonna lose that fear of like relying on the grocery store. And then you'll just say, why am I fearful? I can grow my own. Like I don't need the grocery store. And then how do we begin to save the world? Is if we individually start doing each start doing those things, right? I feel like it
Exactly.
kind of lines up.
Yeah, and the thing is, if everybody kind of started growing some stuff, or everybody, enough people in one neighborhood got some chickens and had eggs for people and stuff like that, these grocery stores would then have to adapt to us, and they would have to lower their prices or whatever it was. They would have to get exactly what we need. If they wanted to survive and thrive, then they would have to adapt to us instead of us adapting to what they have. And you're exactly right with the fear thing. It starts to go away if you learn these ways. And there's different ways of canning and jarring things and pickling stuff and
Yeah.
keeping
And
the
it,
stuff. Go ahead.
no, you go ahead.
I was going to say, so there's all these ways to sustain yourself, and it's not like to get totally off relying on them would be great. It is really hard to do, but it's a step-by-step process. It's just like, you just start with a couple plants in a small garden, and then you see how it works. Right now, while we still have an intact supply chain, is the best way to do this, because even if you fail, you could still go to the grocery store.
And I was also thinking you don't have to be overwhelmed because someone else will be learning something different than you and someone else will be learning something else. And, so like Brandon was saying, someone would have chickens and have the eggs and someone else would have other different vegetables and someone else would be baking sourdough bread and somebody else would, doing different things, right?
Exactly, exactly.
So,
And the last thing we wanted to touch on with this is, we don't think that there's anything wrong with any religious teachings in general, like with the Bible, with Christianity's teaching, with Muslim, with Buddhist teachings. There's everyone has their own way to look at their own belief system. It's just when you try to say that this is going to work for everybody,
and
that's
it's
where
the
I have a
only
problem.
way.
And that's the only way. Yeah, that's the other thing too. But when you're trying to look for the system, again, that's going to save the world, and you're trying to apply it to everybody in a mass produced way, I feel that's really where it gets screwed up. It's more about what can you learn from those teachings? Are you living like Jesus said you should live? Are you, if you're a Christian, are you treating your neighbor as you want to be treated? If you're a Buddhist, are you attached? All these things that they talk about. So, um, again, we're not here to really demonize anybody or their belief system, but it's more about an individual thing, what works for everybody. Because as you heal yourself, as you start to turn on, they say, and do these things and become less dependent on the system and any system, government, the grocery store, religion, whatever it is, as you start to become less dependent on this, you become a guide to the world, really,
I like that what you just said, less dependent on like a belief system, like a church or something, right? It's like when and where did anything ever say that you needed to depend on them? Like they're just a construct, just like everything else. Like you said, religion and government started out as the same damn thing. So if you're not supposed to rely on government, then why would you have to rely on a religious system?
Yeah.
It makes total sense.
I feel like government is just a more sophisticated system of control than religion. It's just the next step as people's consciousness evolved and they realized that they wanted to have sovereignty and freedom and all these things. And the founding fathers said all these things that were great. People are like, yeah, that's what I want. But they didn't, I don't know how they really what it was like. But if you think they're not living like that today, they're still looking to this person up above instead of being a person who's truly free. And to be truly free, it's dangerous. It's scary. It can be. But if you have that faith in God or whoever your particular deity, the universe, whatever it is, if you have that faith that if you just do the right thing, things are going to work out. And doing the right thing, again, isn't always easy. It's hard work. But I think if you put in that work, then it's gonna work out for you, or you really have nothing to fear. And the ultimate fear is death. And we're all gonna die anyway. So
Yeah.
It's like fearing that the sun's going to go down. Guess what? The sun's going to go down. Winter's coming. It's going to come. Right now it's spring, which I love, but winter's going to be here. Things are going to die. So it's a system, like we said before, it's a cycle. I mean, it's a cycle. So if you can learn to adapt to these cycles and to live more in accordance with these cycles instead of trying to expect to get oranges in the winter and go to a grocery store and get strawberries whenever you want. If you just live according with the cycles and nature, like Crow always says, Crow 777, shout out to him, there is no lie in nature, right? If
Mhm.
you start to align your life with that, then I feel like that's when the fear really starts to go away and you could become more dependent. And as you do, like I said, you become a guide to the world, you become a guide to the people around you. And that's how I feel is the only way to really affect change in the world and the only way to really wake people up to it. Because you could tell them all day about the Illuminati and about the Rockefeller medical system and, this shape of the earth or realm that we're in and all this stuff. But unless you provide solutions for them and you're actually living it, because you could tell them all day about growing stuff, but if you're not out there growing it, then it doesn't matter. The proof is in the pudding. You could show
Mhm.
them with the fruit you grow. You grow some squash and you give it to a friend and they're like, "Oh, you grew this?" Yeah, it was freaking super easy. They look at me like, "You did this?" I'm like, "Yeah, you could do it too. It's not that hard." And I feel like that's the way to do it. But when we talk about these systems of control and religion and stuff like that, people always wonder, like, how did it come to be, or how does it happen, right? Why does this happen? And I feel like the way we're raised, it's all about that, getting your validation from the group, getting your validation from outside. And these are things we talked about a lot, but if you start to ask yourself, why do you need this validation from the group? Why do we need other people to validate our points? Why do we, when we learn some truth and we're like, oh my God, why do we have to get the validation of other people? Why do we have to say, look, there's fluoride in the water. It's allegedly it's terrible for you. That fifth dentist, man, he really knew. They say 4 out of 5 dentists agree. That fifth guy, I want to know who he is. Like, he's a real rogue out there. They probably kicked him off of YouTube. That's why I never hear about him. But
Mhm.
yeah, it's really, why do we need that? And I think, like we said in the beginning, it comes down to trauma. And because of this trauma, we get locked in the state of victimhood, in a victim narrative. So a lot of us feel like victims because of it. And then we always want to point the finger and say, it's your fault, it's their fault. If I could just get rid of Donald Trump, if we could just get rid of Joe Biden, if we could just do this, then it'll be fine. And somebody that I like that talks about this a lot is Michael Tessarion. He talks a lot about trauma and the collective, and he's puts it in a way where you can really understand. And when we talk about people like Michael Tessarion, Mark Passio, Owen Benjamin, Donald Trump, whoever it is, it's not like we agree exactly with 100% everything they say. Some people are better than others at it, but I feel if people are providing solutions for you and it's something that resonates, then it works out well. It's the same thing if I was going to tell you about the Bible or tell you about the Tao. We're not like Taoists. We just think that this information is truth and it's very valuable.
Exactly.
And that's why we like to share it with people.
Exactly. And maybe people would call us pickers because we cherry pick what we like from everybody.
Yeah. And again, it's the same thing with one mountaintop, one peak, many paths to the top. It's like, say, like you're teaching somebody how to fish. Somebody's going to want to use a worm and a hook. Somebody's going to want to use a
Their
lure.
favorite thing,
Yeah, they're going to want to use like a rapala, like a little fish, or like a spinner bait, or, a gets it, or, they're going to want to net. Some people net fish. They have like a giant net and they just drag it out there and come back and they,
a dragnet.
exactly, a drag net. So everybody's going to have their own way to do it. So what we're doing is just kind of showing you all different ways, and then people could just apply it in their own life. But again, it really just boils down to not having fear. Go out there and try it. Who cares if you fail? Failing, you learn so much more. That's another quote in the Tao, like, what's the difference between failure and success? Or no, which is more dangerous, failure or success? Like, because sometimes when you're always winning, you feel like nothing you could do is wrong, and that's what gets people in a lot of trouble. Like sports teams,
Mm.
for example, they'll be winning. They'll be like 10-0, like 10 wins, no losses. And then they just get very cocky. And then
Mhm.
another team comes along that's hungrier, that wants it more, and they're able to beat them because they have that hunger inside them. They have that will, and they're just like, we need to win. And the other people are just so used to winning. They think they're just going to win. And then they end up getting smashed, you know?
I remember when I was learning last year, my first several loaves of bread, and I was like attempting to get a nice rise because that's what you want in a sourdough. You want it to rise and be a little bit, a lot of nice little holes in it. Not like I don't want like a lot of holes because holes don't taste like anything and they don't hold butter. So I want them, them to be small. But anyway, I was finding that it was humbling me because I was like, they weren't rising, something wasn't happening. And it took me a good while to just get a hang of what it meant to have a successful sourdough. And I just got to the point where it was like, you know what, as long as it still tastes good, I don't care what it looks like, you know? So, um, I wasn't going to focus on the looks to be happy about whether, at least I was trying. I was just trying.
Yeah, it's like that saying, if at first you don't succeed, try again. Don't be
Yeah.
afraid to fail. Um, and that another thing we want to talk about is eugenics, because this goes along, I think, with victim narrative, because people know a lot about eugenics, like the Georgia Guidestones, the people at the top, they want to get us down to like 500,000 or 500 million people, or whatever the heck it is. They want to get rid of all these people and stuff. And so everybody, well, not everybody, but a lot of people in the truth community know about eugenics. But I think there's a darker side, or just a different side of eugenics that's not so physical. Everybody knows about like abortion and poisons in the water, and like poisons in our food, and all these physical aspects. But nobody really talks about, well, some people do, but the non-physical aspects. This is actually something Owen Benjamin talks about a lot, which I love, and is despair. Despair is one of these things that really is a killer. I feel, I've known a lot of people who've committed suicide in my life, and I feel like a lot of it was because they saw no way out. It was just, they just kind of gave up, and it was all really just in their mind. It was an internal mind thing, and they were convinced that there was really no reason to go on. I mean, I could say that I the behaviors that I engaged in, and we talked about this, like womanizing and all this stuff, is the result now of why I don't have any children yet at 45 years old. And so I was basically a victim of eugenics. I mean, I allowed it myself. It's not like I'm pointing the finger at anybody, but because of the despair. And I used to think that to myself, like, why would I want to bring a kid into this world when it's so terrible? Right. That was the mindset I was at. And now I've come to this
I had the
realization.
same mindset too, believe it or not.
Yeah. And now I
Yeah.
come to this realization where it's like, oh, if I really want to change the world, I got to make a little few mini me's, and um, kind of teach them the right way. Just like you teach somebody who's hungry how to fish, instead of giving them a fish, you teach them, like my little baby, get out there and fish. You want this food? No. But as they get older, you instill these principles and these ways of getting stuff done, and way of being in the world, and not being a slave. And if you can create somebody, or a bunch of little people that aren't slaves, and they grow up to not be slaves, like, shout out to Sarcastic Warlock and Cass, because they have amazing children, and I don't see them being slaves at all. And it's just because of the way that they raise them. And then just imagine if you multiply that on a grand scale. And this is when I used to still want to try to change the world, I was in that point of view. I would say, well, the best way now that I could do it is to just teach it to the children. Really, you could just, because this generation is already done. People could still wake up and do all this stuff, but so many people are far along. And it's like we talked about, and this is last week's episode about the Jedi, why they wanted people so young, because older people are already set in their ways. They already have these attachments. They already have all the stuff that they have to deal with. So I feel like, yeah, why not go make some kids if you can, and teach them the proper way to do it. Heal yourself, and then you could you could spread this on to your children and your children's children, and then they're just going to be another line of all these beacons of light that other people can then hopefully see and want to imitate that behavior.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we talked about the slavery mindset, basically. Um, and the reason why I think people at the top do it is because they want people to work within their system, to build their system, to build what they want. So they just want a bunch of good little slaves, really, at the end of the day, that are going to work toward their goals, work toward the controller's goals, not their own personal goals, right? They're not going to want to go and build their own thing because they're going to be afraid to do it. They're going to be afraid to fail. So they just stick with what they know. They just get by and they do it. It's really reminds me of DJing. When I started to DJ, I had a choice that I can make. It's like I could continue to DJ, or I could get a safe job and I could just get a job where I know I can do it and make money and just be comfortable, or I could just take a chance. And let me tell you, sometimes, like this whole past month, I was pretty poor, but I still had a place to live and I still had food, so it wasn't terrible. But now that the gigs are going, it's great again. I just got to be better at my money this year. But
No, you have to say that you will be. Don't just
yeah,
say, I'm going to try. Don't try,
I
do.
have to be better.
Yes. No,
I
you will
must
be.
do it.
No, say,
Yeah,
I
well,
will be.
yeah, I mean, actually, I was doing really well until 2020 came along. That's really what screwed me up. So, but again, I don't have fear, so I don't have to run out and get another kind of like job, like a slave job or whatever. And again, I'm no stranger to that. I was in the Marine Corps, even throughout the 2020 and all that stuff. I went and worked with UPS for a while and did what I had to do. And it's not what I love to do, but it wasn't terrible. And they didn't require me to cover my smiling face or to take any experimental medical serum. So it was lovely. So, I do what I have to do, but I think that that's really it's that whole thing. It's that leap of faith that you have to take. It's like, you know what, feels right to me. I want to do this and I know it's going to work for me. So I'm going to do it. And I mean, I got through. I never starved to death. I never was living on the street. I have everything that I really need at the end of the day. I've always was able to buy food for my cats, you know what I'm saying, to provide. It's a good thing I didn't have children probably, but what was I going to say? Yeah. So again, it's really just all about fear, and that
It's
brings
true.
us to, well, go ahead. You're going to say something.
No, I keep going.
Okay. I was going to say, and that brings us to, so if the majority of people in society are choosing not to take this leap of faith and they just get jobs that are safe and they're just living comfortable, and some people are even more than comfortable. I think they have everything materialistically that they could desire. They're just maybe not exactly happy. A lot of people I know, I mean, I know people, like I said, who are millionaires. I've said this before, but they're still not, I mean, they're happy, but some of them just are not happy or miserable, or they're just not, it's
They're
because
meh.
it's because the way that they make money um it doesn't fulfill their purpose inside themselves. I guess you could say their purpose for being here. So if we have all these people doing that, what's it doing? I feel like it's building what the controllers or whoever quote unquote want. And what we're doing really is or everyone's building this Tower of Babel, this Tower of Babel that you hear
Mhm.
about in the Bible. It's this society, though. Instead of a tower that everyone's contributing, all the slaves are building, we're just building the society, this inversion of nature, like a city. We've talked about this before, how a city or the world, I guess you could say, is just really a inversion of what you would see if you walked into nature. And everybody's kind of has a hand in that. So it's not an actual tower that they're building. And in the story of the Tower of Babel, all the people were getting together to build this tower to rival God. They wanted to reach as high as God. They wanted to bring it all the way up to the sky. And I kind of see it as a metaphor for what's going on now. It's something not physical. Well, I guess you could say it's kind of physical, but really it's something mental that we're building that's trying to rival nature. We're building this way of being in like a city and all these buildings stacked on top of each other. where we, we shit in a toilet and it just goes away. We never have to deal with it all. We just
Oh,
go to the grocery
yeah.
store and we just buy what we want. We could buy strawberries in the middle of the winter and it's fine. And we never think about it. And I think
Yeah.
at the end of the day, that's really what's going on.
It's putting the blinders on. Oh, I don't like it.
Make it stop.
I know.
Well, I think that's really what this is about, though. It's this whole episode is we're giving people a way to not do that. We're letting them know, we're kind of telling them that you have to learn how to fish on your own instead of relying on the government or the cities or all this stuff for your fish. It's kind of like you got to figure out a way to do it on your own, you know.
Yeah, we will.
I think this might be a good time to bring up the
Yes.
tower card since we were talking about tower and we're
Yeah,
talking about the
I
tarot.
concur.
Let me bring up this nice picture that I have of
And I
the
can open the book that I have.
good idea. Okay, so this is, oops, my screen's not big enough. It's okay, we'll get over it. All right, so this is the tower card, which is number 16 in the major arcana. And you see here, there's this giant tower that was being built to the sky. So what this really represents in the tarot and symbolically is that, like we were saying before, people are not living in accordance with nature. They have this tower that's on top of the mountain. So they went up to the highest point they could find and they're building this thing. And it's kind of like anytime, like when I was womanizing and doing all this stuff and I thought that marriage wasn't natural and people shouldn't be monogamous and all this stuff. I had this whole idea that I was taking bricks of truth. I might have found this random truth out there and I was putting it up there, but I had no context for it. So for me, it made sense. So I'm just building this giant tower to rival God. And then as soon as it got too high, boom, there comes the lightning, right? That crown that I thought I had is thrown right off. And then the man and the woman, which represent really just a person, the masculine and the feminine aspects of each person, the internal ones, the spiritual ones we talk about, are just being flung to the ground. Now the tower is engulfed in flames. So it's like a point where you get to, and we've talked about this before, like an addiction or anything like that, where you hit rock bottom. This is really that moment where everything, you have like an epiphany and everything changes from here. So your former way of living or your former worldview really is this tower and it's just smashed. And I feel like what we were saying before, if society is building this Tower of Babel, this is kind of what's going on right now. We're at the point, well, I don't know exactly where we're at, but we didn't get hit with a wet lightning quite yet. But I feel like we're in the process of building this tower. And if we look at the tarot as underlining cycles, and we know that this is not natural, then we know what's going to come. We know that lightning strike is on its way, right? So that's why we say that you should not rely. People, and Owen Benjamin says that, and it comes from, we're like truthers, and people will be like, do not comply, do not comply. He's like, no, not do not comply, do not rely. There you go. As long as you're not relying on them, it doesn't matter. They don't need your they won't get
Approval.
your compliance because you won't even be part of the system. You're just stepping out of this entire system into your own. And that's really another reason why I love Owen Benjamin, is because him and the people around him, it wasn't just him, but all his fans and followers and stuff, they started to meet up on their own and just build these alternate systems. And really, I think it's kind of in its infancy still, where people are just starting to figure out that they can do it on their own and they're learning from other people. You go to a meetup and people, or a great example of it really is his app that he has, the Beartari Times app, because say you're trying to grow some stuff, and I've done this, you just post something on there like, oh, I'm failing at this, what can I do? And then someone will go, oh, did you try this? Did you try that? What about this? What about that? You live here. So there's all these other ways to do it, all these other different ways to try it. And it's like fishing, right? It's like you're going on a board somewhere like on Reddit or whatever, where everyone goes fishing and like, oh, did you try doing a spinner bait, or did you try going fishing when it's sunny or cloudy, or did you try this lure? So it's that same way. And in that way, just by doing that, you're building an alternative way and you're not relying, and the fear just starts to evaporate.
Yeah. Can I ask you a quick question? Because we have these cycles, right? And we also did the death card. And the death card also represents kind of a, um, like a falling down and then picking yourself back up with the next card. Um, so how would the death card and this card be related, and how would they be different?
So
If
I think they're related in the fact that um there's still a death going on. Like in this card, you have a death of this tower. It's like a death of something that you were building and you were trying to renew. And I think the death card itself, though, is more about what goes on in nature, because you don't have to go build a tower, right? You don't have to try to rival God and get smashed down by lightning. This is something you're kind of calling upon yourself. And I think the death card is something that highlights the natural death that everybody's going to face one day or another, but it's more of a something that's alignment with nature. Whereas this comes more out of the ego. So you can even have a death of, you have an epiphany and then you go through a dark night of the soul. And then you could just get kind of trapped in another cycle. So I feel like the reason they have these cards like this is to just let you know that just because you were wrong before and you know it, and now you're onto something new, it doesn't mean the new thing that you're onto is right. You could still fall victim to your ego and you think that you know better. And especially because you went through this death and now I know, but it still could be another trap. So, and that's really what I find with a lot of people that wake up, quote unquote, wake up, they just get stuck in another trap. So this could be like the death could be like when you wake up to the fact that there are conspiracies, and then you get stuck in the whole truther thing where you're just running around talking about conspiracies all day and you're going down rabbit holes, but you're not actually working on yourself, or you're not actually providing, you're not actually you're not in a state of non-relying. You're still relying on the system, but now you're just aware of it. So you're caught in this cycle. And then eventually it doesn't always happen, but eventually you get to this point where um, something in the physical world happens. I think the death card is more of like it could also be represented as something that's internal, an internal death that happens. And the tower is more of like an external thing that happens in your life, where maybe a project that you're doing or something falls apart because it was based on just an ego way of building things, not like a true holistic way of doing it.
Thank you for
Yeah.
that.
Thank you for that question. Because that when you started to ask it, I got a little scared. I got to admit, I'm like, shit, that's a great point. And then I was like, oh, here we go. And I just, boom.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to read a couple things that says in here for the tower card. It says that upright key meanings are upheaval and sudden change. The reverse meanings are hanging on, fear of letting go. And the numerology is 1 + 6, which is 7, which is related to the Chariot card, number 7, referencing the relationship between control and change. Astrologically, I guess it's related to Mars, aggression, outward action, and masculine energy. And just the little, I'm not going to read the whole thing, but I'm just going to read the little section here that says the tower reminds us that what is breaking down is allowing something else to break free. That's kind of cool.
Yeah. And something in my own life, let me just stop the share here. Stop the share, but we'll still overshare, guys. Don't worry. Something that I could point to in my own life is so in my own particular journey, I used a lot of plant medicines, right? I started to smoke some weed and it was really helping me get through a time in my life. But now, as of 420, I stopped smoking weed for a while. And that was kind of like a tower
Very
moment.
interesting of a date.
Yeah, well, that's when I ran out. So I didn't really have like, I mean, I still could have got more, but I just figured to myself, you know what? This is very synchronistic. I'm like basically down to, I just had a bunch of keef left and I ran out of that. And I'm like, you know, I'm just not going to get any more. I'm just going to go on with it and see how it goes. And again, I'm not like demonizing weed. I think there's all these different medicines that are available and you can use them at certain points of your life. But if you are somebody who thinks that weed is the answer to everything, and again, sometimes it is because some people have different, problems and things that it really helps them. But I feel like I got to a point where I wanted to try to see what it would be like without it. And so far it's going pretty well. So I had that death, you know, I had the experience, the epiphany, the dark night of the soul. And weed really helped me a lot get through that. And it really helped me fit into society because I really wanted to just go crazy and scream at people and be like, what the hell is wrong with everybody? You know, and it kind of chilled me out and it also helped me put a lot of things together and it was a very valuable resource. But for now, I'm, you know, taking a break and I'm really resetting my tolerance, which is nice. So, you know, after a while, I'm sure I'll start smoking once in a while again, and then I could just enjoy it differently. It's something that I don't have to depend on, but I can use it as something that just to make certain experiences different. Or if I know I'm going to be like going into a bunch of research or something like that where it helps, I could just use it in that way. So I think that's another way to highlight the differences. You know, I had that tower moment where I'm like, listen, this is just too much right now. It's getting too heavy, you know, so I just had to let it go. And that's really what the tower is about. It's about letting go. Like you said, control. Would you say control versus that was awesome though. That hit me really well. It hit me really.
The tower reminds us that what is breaking down is allowing something else to break free. Where was the control thing? Oh, numerology, referencing the relationship between control and change.
Exactly, because a lot of times we're afraid of change and we try to control it. And I think that's what they're talking about. And whenever you're trying to control things, you're not going with the flow of the way that things are. You know, you're putting yourself back at the center of the universe and you think it's all about you. So, yeah,
Can I read a little bit more from the
please
book?
do.
Okay, so it says the tower is the third most misunderstood card in the tarot, with imagery that depicts destruction, loss of stability, and violent lack of control. When sudden change sweeps your comfort zone out from underneath you, it's scary and upsetting, but in that moment, you are experiencing growth and expansion. This card shows a tall stone tower being struck by lightning, knocking the crown from its position on top. Two terrified figures leap from the flaming building toward an uncertain landing. The tower itself represents the structural foundation that your life is built upon, while the crown is symbolic of ego being shattered by the lightning bolt of illumination. This powerful card tells us that falling apart is a necessary step in our journey, allowing the next phase to arise in its place. The tower swiftly tears down old structures that no longer support growth.
Yeah, exactly. And you might be asking yourself, well, then what the hell are you smoking right now, Brandon? Well, this is some organic tobacco that I get the leaves and cut them up myself and smoke it. And, you know, for now, again, this is something I do now, but is this something I'm always going to do? I don't know, you know, maybe not, maybe so. But
Right.
these are the questions that I always ask myself. And that's why I don't always totally agree with abstaining from things. You know, like sometimes if someone's an alcoholic and they have a lot of problem with alcohol, they just quit. And now their whole identity is that they're somebody who quit alcohol and they're, you know, they're an alcoholic. But there's another school of thought where people can retrain themselves and then sometimes they can have a drink or two when they go out and it's okay. I mean, some people, they have one or two drinks and their eyes roll back and they just, you know, they become another person. So I don't suggest that for them, but it's, again, it's an individual path, right? You know, so everybody has their own path. So before you're judging me about my smoking, what are you doing? What are you doing in your life? What's causing you to judge me? Huh? And that actually reminds me of something I wanted to say because it's kind of an epiphany I had and it doesn't really fit exactly in this episode, but it is kind of funny because we talk a lot about fear and judgment, right? So these are the two things that I feel that are that can hinder people. And the judgment thing, which I see a lot in society, is because you hear a lot about fear porn, right? You know, you could just turn on the news, that's fear porn. Well, people that I know watch a lot of reality TV. And I was thinking to myself the other day, because even I live with my parents now, and sometimes they'll be watching a show or whatever, and it's like a reality based show. And I'll be in the kitchen cooking and I can hear the show and these people talking. I just find myself judging these people. And then I was like, wait a minute, you know, I always tell myself, don't judge, you know, it's okay. And I thought to myself, I'm like, wow, reality television is judgment porn, because they get these people that are just like the worst a lot of times, you know. And I think a lot of it has to do because it makes people feel better when they could see other people screwing up so bad, you know, they don't feel so bad, but they're judging them, right? So it's just this freaking judgment porn that's out there. So I just want to
That's
coin
funny.
that phrase on our show, judgment porn.
Yeah. New coin, new phrase coined.
New phrase coin, exactly. Awesome. Well, now
Like
we want to,
baby escapism.
yeah, like baby escapism with pacifiers, right? Yeah. And again, we're trying not to judge people. We're just calling things as we see them. Some of these things are a good tool or a good crutch or a good way to get to another point, you know. But when you get to a certain point, and Ram Dass says this, I love it. He's like, every method is a trap. Every method of trying to wake up or whatever you do, it's a trap, because if you get stuck to that method and you identify, you know, like meditators, I'm somebody who meditates. In meditation, you know, you get stuck into this mind frame, and now you have this persona of, I'm a person who meditates and you should meditate, and if you don't, you're not as good as me, and all the stuff. And meditation's helped me a lot, and I've actually gotten back into a lot of it. But I used to meditate in my journey earlier. I was a heavy meditator. I'd meditate like half an hour a day, sometimes an hour at night, and it really did help me through some things. But then I had to let it go at a certain point. And a good analogy that he uses is like, if you get a splinter in your finger, like wood, sometimes you use like another piece of wood to get out that splinter, but then you could throw both of them away, you know? So everything that's out there could be used as a tool to get to the next level, but then you could just throw it away and you don't need it anymore. And then sometimes you come back to it, you know? So I really feel, again, it's an individual journey. Whatever gets you through the day, man, whatever gets you through the day without succumbing to despair and just wanting to blow your brains out or whatever, do it, you know, until you get to the next level. And then you figure it out. And then the tower moment happens. The lightning bolt comes down, hits the crown falls, and then you're on to the next thing. And that's will bring us into what we want to talk about next, which is that lightning bolt, right? So what's the lightning bolt represent, right? So if you're looking at the tower card with that lightning bolt, I feel like that represents the interference of a higher power, which is, you could say it's God, you could say it's the all, you could say there's a lot of ways to describe it, but I feel like it's the best way to describe it is, if you're going against the natural order of things long enough, something in that natural system is going to come and smack you, and it's going to disrupt everything and turn your whole world upside down. In the sense, we're talking about society in general here, and we're comparing society to the Tower of Babel, and we're saying that basically everybody in society is building this giant, it's not really a physical tower, I guess you could say it's like a spiritual tower or whatever, it's a non-physical tower. If it keeps going on, what's going to happen? You know, does this realm that we live in have a reset button? And things we could talk about are like Sodom and Gomorrah, right? So why don't you talk a little bit about Sodom and Gomorrah, and then I'll talk about Sodom and Gomorrah, about what I know and what I've learned.
Okay, I had another thought that slipped my mind. Okay, never mind. So yeah,
Sure?
you just
You sure? I could talk about
Oh
Sodom.
yeah, no, so I was just going to quickly say that you said we're building the tower, not necessarily physically, but we kind of are building it physically because of all the cities we live in, right? Because, and I've been listening to David Avocado Wolf's interview on Crow. I think it was episode 401. Was it? Okay, 401. really, really, I felt like it was a really good episode because it was a reminder of just going back to nature, and it brought a lot of like calm back. Not that I was in despair or anything, but it actually gave me more peace because there was something you mentioned about because of course we live in cities, we live in these homes that are have angles of sorrow, like Crow talks about,
which
square,
is,
boxy,
yeah, angle star, which is basically, I mean, if you're in your house,
a
look at
right
the
angle.
top of your roof, it's a right angle. And these are, it goes along with feng shui. It's because energy just comes and crashes. And if you look at a lot of people who have money and stuff, they have these giant
Domes.
cathedral ceilings. And then if you, yeah, you look at all these like all these cathedrals and stuff that are built, they all have domes and they all have these great angles that are like the pyramids or even a
You
dome where
look
the
at
energy can,
yurts.
yeah, yurt, stuff like
Yurts are
that.
round and they have a dome. And so these kinds of buildings are much more in line with nature than the buildings that most of us live in right now. And so, we've allowed these things to be built around us. We've allowed ourselves to move into these big cities. We've allowed ourselves to uh, be exploited in so many different ways. You know, we don't do things in line with nature. And so we are allowing ourselves to build this tower as well in this way, physically as well. But something that really gave me a lot of peace with just knowing that there's always a way, and you don't have to be in despair about the future or anything, because to me it's like God always provides, right? And so he was talking about, David Avocado was talking about water and springs, and he was basically saying there's water everywhere, there's springs everywhere, you just have to go find them. And that was very just it was just kind of almost another reminder of like how I don't have to worry. Like there's nothing to fear, there's nothing to worry about. Not that I ever worried about that, but if there are people out there thinking about getting a piece of land and going and settling the land and doing whatever, they might be worried, oh my God, well, what if we don't find water? No, don't worry about what if we don't find water. There is water. There's always water. There's going to be water somewhere. And he talked about something that I thought was so very interesting, I'd never heard about in my life, which was a water witch. And then it's kind of like a sync, but because then I kept seeing, in the last couple of days, I kept seeing this word called dowsing or something. Like, did you see my post about that?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
I was like, I'd never heard this. So I guess it has something to do with finding water, and you either use like a branch or a wood, a piece of stick or copper or something, but essentially you have to know what you're doing, I guess. But you go in search of water, and this stick will literally like bend when it starts finding it'll bend toward the ground when it finds the water source. I mean, to me, that's just mind-boggling and amazing. And it just goes to show that there needs to be no despair, no fear,
Yeah.
because you're being provided for.
Yeah. The good thing about that is, even if, because you live in Arizona where water is always concerned, so it could have been just this thing running in the back of your mind, some kind of fear that you weren't aware of, and now it's been alleviated. And I was actually introduced to that idea when I was really young, because I think there was like an episode of Lassie or whatever. I used to watch Nick at Night, and Lassie, I think it was Lassie, and they had to look for water. And what it is really is, it's like well, in the show, and I've seen it a couple other times, but there's like a stick that's like a Y. So if you find a stick that's a branch and it comes to a Y, there's a way to hold it with your hands upside down. And then I guess when you get over the water, and that's what a water witch is, somebody that knows how to do it, it just falls on its own. So it'll, it's not like it, sometimes I guess it bends, but this way you have it held up and then it just like falls and it points down to where the water is. So yeah, that's something I definitely want to look into whenever I get some land. Gonna get
That
me a
sounds
water
very,
witch.
or learn to be one.
Yeah, well,
Self
yeah.
self-sustain.
So, well, yeah, I'll
I
get
found a
one.
free, okay, I found a free Kindle book about it, which I didn't, it was funny because I wasn't even looking for it. But yesterday and today, I kind of got myself into a big whole like downloading free Kindle books from Amazon. But
Nice.
anyway, and I didn't even realize one of them was about that. And I randomly, well, because it's not random, everything is happening for a reason. Um, came across posts that had nothing, that I didn't think had anything to do with that same topic, and yet they were talking about it. It was like, whoa, I was so surprised.
Yeah, you didn't know you were looking for it, but
Yeah,
synchronistically, it just popped up.
right. So yeah, source knows that
Yeah.
I'm looking for that information. But yeah, that episode, by the way, is really good. I recommend it. It's for episode 401. And dare I bring up one more thing that they mentioned that I'd never heard of? I just thought it was very, very interesting because we're oversharing, so I might as well. Um, but I had never heard of this concept of a fish fall, or like any animals like falling from the sky. And I still haven't really even had a chance to look it up. But had you ever heard of
Um,
that?
yeah, I've heard about it a little bit before, yeah.
Okay. Well, what do you know? Like,
Well, I don't know. So when you said that to me earlier, I thought you were talking about when the fish swim up the waterfall.
no.
All right, so what are you talking about then?
Okay. So this is weird. I'm assuming because I haven't looked it up, but literally like fish falling from the sky.
Oh, I see what you're saying, yeah.
Like allegedly it happened in Texas or something.
Like manna from
And
heaven.
yeah, well, it was more on the along the lines of, this is what David Avocado Wolf was saying, that he doesn't believe that things pardon me, can go extinct because source will find a way to put it back where it needs to go. So, and allegedly these things used to happen, these falls of whatever these creatures, any creature that, because it happened with multiple different kinds of creatures, lizards and I don't know, other kinds of creatures, falling from the sky. And I guess they usually try to do it when no one's looking or something. But the media will try to explain it away as like, oh, some like, tornado or like hurricane went through and picked up a bunch of fish and then dropped them over here somewhere, just to try to explain it away. But there have been many other occurrences of things that wouldn't make sense for. So, and again, I haven't looked it up yet. So it's all new to me because I just have been listening to that episode yesterday and today and haven't looked it up yet. But it was very interesting. And he mentioned how he thinks that chem clouds, which are created by chemtrails, allegedly, aren't necessarily doing what other people say they're doing. He thinks that they're actually blocking those things from happening.
Oh,
So
that's
that,
really interesting.
right, so that we don't get those creatures back that have allegedly become extinct. And so we just keep creating this. In other words, we're not replenishing the earth the way it's supposed to be. It's just continuing to, they're kind of, it's almost like they're depleting everything.
Yeah. So
Allegedly.
yeah, so it looks like they're trying to cause this way where it looks like we're depleting everything, but it's in a false way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it reminds me of the Tower of Babel, because they're putting this stuff in the sky to say like, oh, we're going to stop God from dropping these animals down where they need to be replenished and stuff. It's like, I don't know. It reminded me of that.
Well, we'll look into it further, and if we find anything out, we'll definitely overshare some more with you guys if we could find some examples of it. I have, it does ring a bell. I don't remember who was talking about it exactly, but I think I've heard of fish falling from the sky before, because it was compared to the Israelites in the desert and the manna falling from heaven, and
Mm,
fish falling so they could eat and stuff like that. So yeah, we'll totally look into it.
yeah.
It's raining cats
Yeah.
and dogs.
Yeah, like basically that. Yeah. So maybe there's a reality to that at some point.
Yeah, you never know. I mean, I've seen crazier, I've heard of crazier things going on in this realm. So who knows, especially because we're always tricked into thinking this realm is so physical. And if it's really more a manifestation of our consciousness and what we're seeing out there, I mean, technically anything can happen. Jesus said you can move mountains. So, I've even
Yeah.
seen videos of trees moving recently, like on their own, allegedly. I don't know. It was like a clip I saw on TikTok. So who knows? But,
Weird.
right. And then Tolkien talks about that all the time about
The
the trees.
Ents.
Yeah. And the trees themselves too, not just the ants. In Lord of the Rings, the trees actually themselves go to battle. So yeah,
Wow.
they go at when Rohan is under attack and they have to go to Helm's Deep. That's what I was looking for. When they're at Helm's Deep, they look and they see that the forest, all of a sudden the next day, there's just this forest that wasn't there before, and now it's there. They're like, uh-oh, and that's where all the orcs go. I think it's in the extended versions of the movie too.
Mm.
All the orcs and evil men that flee end up going there, and then they're never seen again because the trees just take care of them. But that really goes back to the what we're going to talk about with this whole natural occurrence of things that could happen in this realm, like of a reset. So, like Sodom and Gomorrah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. You have those kinds of stories in the Bible. Sodom and Gomorrah. You have, you know, uh, Abraham asking God, like, can you please save this town if there's at least 50 people, or, that are righteous? And God's like, sure. And then he's like, well, what about if there's 40? Well, what about if there's 20? What about if there's 10? What about if there's 5? I can't remember the actual count he went down to, but I think it was like 10 or 5. And
they get to one.
literally,
They eventually get to one, which is
I don't know if they got to one because God didn't save the town clearly because
well, no, it gets down to one, and then they just have to pull him out of there. Is basically what happens. They're like, we can only find one righteous man. That's what I meant. That's what I was getting
yeah,
at.
yeah,
So.
they only find one. So the town gets burnt anyway. So they have to go save that man. Yeah.
Yeah, and the great thing I like about that is there is one righteous man, which kind of eludes me to believe that he was living in accordance with natural law, with God's law, and he was the one man, and he was saved. God sent angels in there to save him, and
And his daughters.
yeah, and his wife. But his wife turned around. We all know that story. She turned to her pillar of salt. So it's
And
really
that
a
could be metaphorical for turning back and wanting to go back to your evil ways.
Yeah, exactly. Because some people just aren't ready, and that's what's going on. They tried getting her out of there, but she just wasn't, physically she was leaving, but inside in her brain and stuff, she just didn't want to leave. She didn't want to leave that town. So she got turned into a pillar of salt, allegedly. So,
Yeah.
yeah. And then you have Noah's Ark. That's another really big story that looks like it's a reset where allegedly there's a bunch of wicked men and nobody was living in accordance with the way things should be with nature, and everybody was like,
Except for Noah.
except for Noah and his family. So 8 people were saved along with 2 of each animal, 2 by 2 got on that ark. And what happened? It rained and 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 everything was flooded out. And the people on the ark were allegedly the only ones that survived. And well, I guess some other people kind of survived too, but it was like a reset, really. And that reminds me a lot of course, we got to talk about Lord of the Rings. Well, we already talked about it a little bit, but in Lord of the Rings lore, there's this city. It's an island called Numenor, and that's where all the kings were from, where Aragorn and all his people were from. I mean, not him specifically, but like his line of people. And that was an island that was gifted to men originally at the beginning of the age, and everybody got it, and everyone was loving it, and they're getting all information from the West, which is basically where the gods lived. Like people would sail from there. The elves that lived there would sail and teach them different things. And then just after years and years and years and years, people just started to want to rival God. And it got to the point where one of the kings actually built this giant fleet, and he got everybody to go sail toward the west, toward where the gods lived, to go fight them so they could try to gain immortality because they were afraid of death. And when they touched the land, that's when Iluvatar intervened, who was the god of that realm, and ripped open the sea, and all the boats went in, and then the island of Numenor itself sank into the ocean. And that kind of reminds me of Atlantis. You know, we hear about the destruction of Atlantis. So I really feel that that's what that lightning bolt is trying to signify in that card. And I feel like our society is headed towards some kind of reset because of that. But again, you have nothing to fear. If you have no fear and you're living in accordance with the way things should be in natural law, and you're starting to depend on yourself and, you know, heal yourself and do all these things that we talk about, I feel like a way will be provided. Because even when Numenor was destroyed, there was still a line of people who were called the faithful, and that's how Aragorn came along. He was descended from them, and that's where Isildur, who's the guy. See, that's the thing about Lord of the Rings. If you just watch the movie, Isildur is the guy who, in the beginning or whatever, when they show that war that happened against Sauron, he's the one who cuts the ring from his hand, and he keeps the ring for himself. So everybody looks at him like he's this evil guy. But actually, before that, he does a lot of awesome things. Like he saves the tree in Numenor. He saves that tree. He goes in and grabs a fruit, and he almost dies in the process. He almost gets hacked to pieces. Nobody knows who it was, though. He went and covered his face, and he stole that. And then him, and I think it was his brother and all their people that were loyal to them, were on ships, you know. So when this destruction happened, this giant wave came in, and all these winds, and it broke the masts of their ships or whatever, but it took them to Middle Earth. It took them away from all the destruction, and then they were able to keep their line going. So I feel like that's kind of like a little nod to, just like Lot was saved when nobody else was, you know, the source, God, the all, whatever it is, will save you if you're doing what you're supposed to do and you're living the way you're supposed to live.
Golden rule.
The golden rule. So there really is nothing to fear.
Yeah. I love it.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, unless you have anything else you want to say there, Sharon, that brings us to the end of this episode.
And this time it's only been about an hour and a half.
Yeah, we kept it down to a respectable amount of time. And there is more on this, guys. So we're going to leave a little cliffhanger here. We're going to have a guest next episode, and we're going to talk about what this reset could be, and what you'd see like in society, like in movies and in all this, I guess you could say, pop culture, whatever it is that we consume, that there is maybe a hint to what the reset is and stuff. So that's what we're going to be talking about next week. So make sure you join us next week. I'd like to give a shout out to the chat. Thank you guys so much for being here and chatting with us and hanging out. It's so awesome that you guys do that. Thank you to everybody who's commented on all of our shows. We really love that stuff. That's the best way you could support us. So there's a bunch of different ways you could support us. The best is come to the chat if you can make it. If not, comment, let us know how you feel, ask us questions, you know, all these things. And then the other way is, if you go to morelawsmoreproblems.com, you can go to the support page there, and you can actually donate to us if you want. But again, we don't require that. We keep our show for free. And because we feel like this is really what we want to do, you know, just doing the show helps us tremendously to express all these things we learned, because now we don't go crazy with all this knowledge inside. We're able to express this to other people, and then we could share it around. And we've been getting a lot of really good feedback lately, and that's what I love. I mean, we might not have the most views of any shows out there on YouTube, but our fans are really the best, and we really get the best comments and the best questions, because people that watch our show really get it. And I feel like because of that, it's building something awesome. So thank you guys so much. We really do appreciate it. And
our peeps are the cream of the crop.
Yeah, they really are. They're the best. So, you know, So keep supporting us, and we will keep doing it. We're here for you. What do we say to the good people, Sharon?
Thanks, everybody. And if you're not oversharing,
then you're totally not caring.
That's right.
That's right. So keep oversharing. Later, everybody.
Share on.